everything that we interact with can be described by a code. It's bring us something, a new perspective that we cannot have from another human being. We need really a new kind of imagination. Hello, everyone. I'm super happy to be here to open the first post-software event. And today I will talk about a combination of two perspectives that is inside me, but also in what I'm teaching, because I'm a teacher at SWPS University at the design department. And let me just say a couple of words about my background. It's not because I like to talk about myself. It's because I want to show you from which perspective I will tell what I have to tell to you. And because I study cultural science, and then I become a designer, and I self-taught coding in the very early days of Flash and action script, and then processing P5 and JavaScript. And this is what I'm teaching to my students. So they are designers, and I teach them coding, and they hate me for that. But they also experience something completely new. And so I also there was a time when I was working as a designer in a creative studio, and I was also coordinating some processes around websites design and animation and so on. And I also very often was the interpreter or the translator between different words. And I really think that today we need this bridge that between humanist perspective and IT. I get a device here. Is it working? Yes. So this is actually the bottom line of what I want to tell you today. If there is one thing that I want you to remember is this slide, right? So I don't know who you are, guys. Are you humanist or more on the IT side or something completely else? I guess I was creating these slides with the humanist in my mind, but if you are from the engineer more world, I guess you can think about it, how to talk to a humanist about these topics. So what I think is that we need today is that the humanists learn a little bit of coding or technological skills, not only to know how to do things in these new tools that we have, but also to broaden the imagination. And this is something that we need today. Yeah. Oh no, not that way. So I like this definition of AI. So just to just enter the topic and be on the same page. Very often I have to define AI for people that don't know what it is. So this is my favorite definition, right? It's an algorithm that is great in finding patterns in large databases. And so from a humanistic way of viewing it, it has this characteristic that can be very important. It can write different stuff, of course, but when we think about the language and what language can do today, it can not only create words in a book, but also be performative, be transformative, because everything on our computer can be described by language, right? Everything that we interact with can be described by a code. So this is something that a humanist is not aware of very often. It's tireless. It's know a lot about a lot, and it's not human. And that is something that is not obvious at all. I mean, of course, it's not human, but it's bring us something, a new perspective that that we cannot have from another human being, and in some cases it can be very important. I will show you some example later. So yeah, so what I'm trying to say here, that we can create new tools, we can design small workflows, installation that can be very specifically for very specific needs that a humanist researcher or an artist could have. So what I'm seeing from a couple of years now, that when I'm looking for the courses of what we are teaching to different people, it's prompt engineering from one side, right? How to use the tools that we have in a way like very straightforward, and fully technical things like AI courses with coding and so on and so on. And there is something between that is missing. Yeah. So let me just make like a quick a quick question here. How many of you are like from IT, coding, engineer stuff? If you can raise your hand. Okay, right. So it's like 90% of the. Okay, so here are like a couple of tools that most of you will know. So I'll just go quickly over it, and I will talk a little bit more about the cases then. So yeah, tools, Python, everyone know that, JavaScript, P5, but you know, people don't know that we can code Excels, right? Or we can code different programs that we normally use by hand. And then, do you know ComfUI? How many people know ComfUI? Yeah, so not so much. So that is a very nice software that is built by the community for creating a workflow with some AI models. Basically for creating images, generating images, but not only. We can now put videos, but also LLMs and so on and so on. And the main thing is that it's completely built from the community. It's open, it's free, and all the models that you can use, it's also this kind. So you can create really complex installation or tools for yourself in this software, if you have a good computer, of course. LM Studio is somehow, maybe it's not similar, but it's also a tool that you can download freely and just use LLMs, so language models on your computers, those one that are free, and then you can also build on it automated tasks, data processing, and so on and so on. And then there are different APIs, but you know that. So I would just go to the cases that I wanted to show you. So I just took like two cases from the Word and two of my projects to talk about what piece of research or artistic installation could be done. This is Holly Herndon, that she's a performer, that she's leading a choir, and she created Holly Plus, that is a voice model on her own voice and on the voice of the choir, on the sound of the choir. And then she just freely let people use it. So in a way, what is interesting here is that she decides to let it go, right? To see what people will do with that. So it's the opposite of what we are talking normally, that people will somehow want to secure their voices or their performance or their images. The interesting thing in that project is that she's interested in the creativity of normal people that would just take the voice and do stuff with it. And then another one is at the University of Kentucky, Abigail Fiery, I would say, uh, create a software that allow people. I guess it's a chatbot, so it's a website. Allow people to talk with ancient medieval religious texts. So it's a chat where. There is a knowledge about the medieval historical facts in it, and then it would different researcher would are able to communicate, to talk with those papers, those documents. And here is one of my projects. I'm actually in the process of writing a PhD, and because it's on Design Institute, so I'm writing about the automatization of the process of designing wayfinding. Wayfinding is the signage, or this is an element of wayfinding, right? It's the sign that tell you what is the way to go somewhere, but it's also an information space that tell you where is the bathroom, and so on and so on. And with my friend, we are now writing a paper that analyze the semiotic of those signs. What is semiotic is the process of creating meanings, right? How an icon create meanings in our head, like inform us that this is a bathroom for men and this is a bathroom for women, right? What is the difference in designing this kind of icon with an icon of, I don't know, an emergency exit? And what I did is I created, with the help of LLM Studio and Gemini and other LLMs, I created a workflow where the software analyze all the icons for me. But it's not an automatization to just gain time. What the purpose was to have a non-human perspective. It means that if if you as a human see a sign, you already know that it's a part of a system of wayfinding. And the system itself is already creating meaning for you. That means that if you see the sign of I don't know, a coat, right? You will know that you can leave your coat in the room for that. But when you ask an LLM for it, it doesn't see the context. It just say, okay, so you show me an icon of a phone. It can be a place where you are a phone available, or it's the act of communicating with someone. So it enlarge the semantic space, and this is the perspective that we are interested in, and that is very hard to see if we are a human being. And that's another project that I'm actually in the middle of. what a theater approached me and asked me if I would do a grief bot for a piece. And a grief bot is a bot that is created with the materials of someone that is dead. And the piece doesn't want to create like a fake soul of someone or something. It's actually really a grief bot. So on the scene there will be an actor. There will be uh, a doll, like a corpse, and the voice, the grief bot. So the actor will act as it in grief because he lost someone, and then at some points he would create or pay for making a bot like that. And so what I'm doing here now, it's I'm creating a voice from a real person, a real person voice, and then we are also thinking about what part of the memory should have the bot, and this process is incredibly interesting in a term of thinking about identity, of relationship, of grief, of course, and of what we leave behind, right? And what we think about when we think about someone that left us, and maybe more the process of making the bot than the act of interacting with it. And so yeah, so we are in the middle of it. You will be able to see the play at the end of February in Wrocław and hopefully in Warsaw later. Yeah. So what I'm telling to the humanists when I'm talking about all those things is that they will this way of thinking about technology and this if they are willing to learn a little bit of coding or technologic skills, require curiosity, tolerance for errors, basic debugging skills, common sense when the model is wrong, of course, because when we are creating something with AI, we know that it doesn't know everything, and willingness to think procedurally. And of course, people that know how to code know that it can be very frustrating, but also I found that wandering around with AI is still faster than doing everything manually. And what is the most important for me is that it allows projects that would be impossible before, right? But this is a thing that we need really a new kind of imagination from the humanists, right? But to have that, they need to learn a little bit about the technicality of this realm. Yeah, and this is my final thing. I do believe that every researcher is in some way a coder, because when we are writing an academic paper, we have to create a very logical interlinked structure in our mind, and is actually the same that I'm doing when I'm coding, right? That I'm creating a structure that linked variables, functions, and so on in a complex complex workflow. So this is it for me. Thank you very much for today, and I'm welcoming all contact from you, and of course questions on the site.
Hi, I'm Kuba. I'm wondering how you find humanists thinking about AI in general. Because I guess if most of us are coming or are related to IT, we are very enthusiastic about the
Yes.
AI implementations, that we are now becoming an artist almost using AI. So what's your experience with talking to humanists when you need to, for example, also tell them that they need to learn a little bit of the technology to make the solution somehow better, and in general, how you
Or
find
even
the
possible, right?
yeah, that's correct. So how is your experience looking?
Well, very different, I guess. But when I'm talking on an event like this one, or recently I had a similar talk on a conference called Human Tech Meeting, I see a lot of curiosity, and several people approach me later and ask me what courses of Python should they take to just start, right? So I see openness, but it's not for everyone, right? And this is something that it's also important to say, right? That there are like a notion of new possibilities, but well, it requires something that is you know that, right? It requires something that is a specific way of thinking, right? And yeah, and for someone it's just impossible. And from another side, I have my students, and they really are fear the topic in the beginning, but I'm try to make it fun and show them how what impact that it can make, and yeah, for some it will stay, from others they will forget it after the exams.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And we also have another question, so just give it the mic.
Hi, thank you. It was very interesting, but I wonder what's your secret sauce for at the same time promoting the AI usage and being aware of ecological cost?
Right. I mean, of course, it's not the topic of this presentation, but normally when I'm teaching at the design department, I'm starting with a very long talk. Like my maximum was like 6 hours long, and we talked about very different controversy, right? And people react in a different way, right? There are like, I have a group now in Wrocław that is really anti-AI, and from ethical view, from ecological and so on and so on and so on. And it's fine for me. I mean, I'm not. I'm just saying there are these possibilities, but there are also these challenges, right? And if you don't want to do that, it's okay with me, but you have to be aware that this is happening, and you have to be from one side a consumer that is aware of a conscious consumer, but from the other side, yeah, AI is just reshaping our reality, and you have to just see what is happening and then make your own decision. So I'm not like a techno optimist, if you want to yeah, if I something. Well, not so much, because I'm not creating. I know that, for instance, using the models on your own hardware is more ecological than in the cloud, from several reasons. So this is one thing that I always try to tell to my students, that it's the best way to do that, and then it's free. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, hi. Thank you. The question is about, I know you're running the the research right now about the semiotics, but can you share some thoughts on how the AI is different in that field?
Well,
How AI's perspective is different from human?
yes, I mean, I tried to tell it, but I know that my English, like, it's not perfect. But so I will try it again. The most important thing for me is that it's when I'm asking about the interpretation of science, it's look at it at each individually, and it's not connecting it on the system. So it's broaden the possibility of interpretation. When a human being, even a researcher, is looking at it, somewhere behind, we know that it's a part of a system. We know what we are seeing, and the AI, we can prompt it so it in a way that it will assess each sign separately.
But is there anything right now you can say that this is totally radical or revolutionary way of looking at semiotics from the AI's perspective that is so different from human perspective?
No,
No.
no, it's not. No, it's not. It's just give us a perspective that somehow make deeper our research or the process of finding meaning in all of that. But it's not like an alien that it would come and see something completely different. No, it's not that.
Well, too bad.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. Okay.
There is a question here.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. So I have a question regarding the grief bot that you've
Yes.
talked about. I know that you've mentioned that you created it for the performative reasons, like at the beginning. But I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts in general about using AI in, and for the really lack of a better word, grieving market? Because we already know that there is a market for that and
Yes.
for solutions like that. I'm wondering what are your thoughts, because obviously, as you said, we can create a lot of things with AI. The question is if we should.
The challenge with AI, and not only in the grieving market, but in
Yeah,
very,
so sorry for this term.
no,
Like
that's all right.
really, I was really thinking hard how to call it, but don't have a better word.
The challenge is that there is so many new fields that we lack of research, right? We are not able to conduct so much research that we need to. But the some of them that I read are like showing like different things. Some of them are saying that those grief bots are like it's a trouble, like it could make the process of grieving longer. But others said that in specific situation, when we are seeking for closure, the interaction with this persona that we know that it's not it's a role-playing game, right? Can help us just tell the important things, right? In a therapeutic way, but also in a therapeutic context, right? So it have to be secure in a way, right? And in that way it can be okay, it can be beneficial for the grieving. But as I said, it's just a couple of research around. So I guess I don't know, right? And then we called it GriefBot, but it's used for different purposes. It's not only for grieving, but it's also to perform something on the ceremony, right? And then we just, we don't use it anymore. So there is also that there is different purposes for that.
Thank you. Okay. I think that's all. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.